Chapter 30, Market Failures. Market failures ask a couple of questions. What is the optimum level of pollution? Is it 0? Is it 100%? Is it somewhere in between? It's somewhere in between. Can we have 0 pollution and live in a modern society? Probably not. There's going to be some give and take in this, and that's where market failures come in. Market failures occur when there's an inefficient allocation of resources in the market. For example, an externality is the cost or benefit of market activity that affect a third party. So anything that affects an individual who's not associated. Say you live near a paper mill. Now, I don't know if you've ever driven through a town or been near a paper mill, but it smells disgusting. It's awful. It just smells like there is a giant gas leak or sewage leak throughout the city. That's just the process of making paper, though. That would be an externality. The neighborhood or the community or the whole town need to deal with that, and it is something that is not associated with them directly, but is a part of their daily life. It is a negative externality. There's negative externalities such as working by a paper mill, working near a milk farm, or living near a milk farm. In that case, you get some smells. Now, there are also positive externalities, such as, say you are in an apartment building and you don't have a fire extinguisher, but maybe your neighbor does, or maybe there's one further down the hallway. So a fire extinguisher in an apartment complex would be a positive externality. It goes both ways, really. The internal cost of externalities is the cost of a market activity paid by an individual participant. Internal cost is paid for by the individual who is related. An external cost is the cost of an activity imposed on people not participating in that market, such as individuals living in a city or municipality, community, whatever you want to call it, that does have a paper mill. They have to pay for it just as much as individuals who work at the paper mill. There are also social costs, the sum of the internal cost and external cost of a market activity. Needless to say, at this point, the social cost of a paper mill being in your community can be pretty high. For example, say you live in Springfield and you go to school at Springfield Elementary. Your name is Bart or Lisa Simpson, and well, what do we know about the Simpsons? If you know anything about them, you know that their electricity comes from a nuclear reactor. The owner of that nuclear reactor is Monty Burns. Well, Monty Burns tries to cut corners. So there might be some less than exemplary storage of nuclear waste. In this case, it ends up in a lake. There are animals in that lake, such as fish. Well, in this particular episode, which I believe is from one of the earlier seasons, Bart catches a 3-eyed fish that he names Blinky. And the point of it is, there's a negative externality of living in a area that is in a neighborhood where there is a nuclear facility if the waste products of that facility aren't taken care of. So that would be a negative externality. Cost experienced by third parties. Too much of a good thing is consumed and produced. A negative externality in this case would be toxic waste in a body of water where people fish. There's also positive externalities. Benefits experienced by third parties. Not enough of the good is consumed and produced. I don't know if you've ever been to Ogilvy in West Virginia during Christmas, but the entire area is lit up. It's gorgeous. I think so anyway. I like Christmas lights. It's just beautiful. That is a positive externality because Ogilvy has such a large display. People in the neighborhood get to experience it just in their backyard almost. So negative and positive externalities, they go both ways. Another negative externality is exhibited in the movie Erin Brockovich. Anymore, I think it's probably on TBS from time to time, or one of those afternoon movie shows. And what happens is the electric company is pumping toxic substances into the groundwater, basically. They're not following ethical guidelines and making sure their tanks are sealed correctly, and a lot of people get sick and die. So that again is another example of a negative externality. So, which of the following activities would most likely create a negative externality? I mentioned this, I believe, in our group chat, and it is smoking a cigarette. Smoking a cigarette has a negative externality. It's not good for you, it's not good for the person smoking, but it is, secondhand smoke is a carcinogen. If you smoke enough of it, or if you get enough secondhand smoke, even though you're not a smoker, you may get some forms of lung cancer. So that is definitely a negative externality. Which of the following activities is most likely to create a positive externality? That would be getting a college degree. The assumption is if you have a degree, you've learned to think things through, you follow rational thought, you're a logical individual, you have more awareness of society around you, and you have a wider knowledge base than individuals who didn't go to college overall. I know there are some cases where that's the opposite, but what are you going to do? Okay, correcting negative externalities. We've got dead weight loss because we're not being efficient. In some cases, that might be monetary. Say you are working at a coal plant and a president says, well, we're going to have to put some more scrubbers on this. You're either going to have to shut down your plant or invest a lot of money in fixing that, or affixing scrubbers to that so the water is better, or making the smokestack higher so it doesn't go into the breathing air that we are subjected to. So there is going to be some level of dead weight loss anytime there's a negative externality. People have to pay for it, or rather the interior needs to pay for those costs, and because of that, wages might be lower. There might be less money that is available to the community because of that. Correcting for negative externalities, government involvement. The government can slow down negative externalities a number of ways. They can tax the product. A lot of electric producing coal plants did have taxes or higher taxes associated until recently. You can regulate production. That one is a little harder, but you still can say you can only have this much. Alcohol in Mon County. There are only so many licenses to sell alcohol in the county of Monongalia. If you don't have one of those licenses, sorry about your luck, you can't sell hard liquor. You can encourage research and development of alternative substitutes to the product. Well, right now we're looking at alternatives to fossil fuel. We're working on wind power, working on solar power. So those are some alternatives. And assign property rights. In the case of The Simpsons, they would assign property rights to the nuclear power plant to take care of that lake. If that lake is in disrepair or toxic, then they would have to go in and clean it. I don't know how one would clean toxicity from a lake, especially when you're dealing with nuclear, but they're responsible for it. For secondhand, for smoking, I touched on that before. Government does a lot to take care of that, or to curb that. They've acknowledged at this point it's wrong, so it is heavily taxed. You can't buy it unless you're of a certain age. Those who are selling it have to make sure that they're selling it to someone of age. There are alternatives now. There's vaping, which I don't know if it's any better or not, but it's an alternative. Suppose good X creates a negative externality. Which of the following would not be an appropriate way to correct the negative externality? Subsidize the production of good X, tax the production of good X, limit how much of good X can be produced, require the producers of good X to pay for external costs that arise. Well, the answer would be A, subsidize the production of good X. If we want less of it, we're not going to give that company money to produce more of it. That's just counterproductive. If you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter, FSU, FRAZER, or online through email, jfraser@fairmontstate.edu, Instagram, FSU Fraser, Snapchat, which I'm not on right now because my phone's dead, FSU Fraser, and that might be it. I'm not even sure anymore. But if you have any questions, get in touch with me. I'll do the best I can to answer it as soon as possible. Thank you so much.